So today, in the 7 of 8 financial plan series, we're talking about estate planning. And we're talking about the estate planning of the financial plan that we're doing for Tom and Susan. And this is the 7th episode. We've gone over all the worries and we're one away from finishing. So, Tom, why are we doing this video today?
Yeah, we're doing this video because in my experience, most people who come in have never thought of an estate plan. They don't have a plan in place. And to the extent that they say they have something, all they say is, oh, we have a will. And then that's it, right? And that's not enough, right? We need you to think through not only what happens at death, but what happens for the surviving spouse, right? When we're doing estate planning, that's our first spot is we need to plan. If you're married, we need to plan for what happens when the first one passes, and we don't know which one that's going to be. So we'll get into more of the details as we go along, but you really need to have a plan for the surviving spouse, and then eventually where you want all the assets to go, how you want them to get to who you want them to go to. So let me bring up the show notes. You can find these at the link below our video. They're also on our website at cardinalguide.com. We have the board, and then like we've done in all of the other series of this 7, we're in the 7th of 8 of these videos, we have the actual plan that we did for Tom and Susan go through, where there's a section towards sort of the back of the plan where we walk through some of the documents, estate planning documents. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show, but that's where in the plan we've actually addressed it for Tom and Susan. We'll get into that as we go. So let me turn it back to Hans. We'll get going through sort of piece by piece and really lay you out what things you need to think about from estate planning, and then specifically what we recommended for Tom and Susan.
Okay, so Tom and Susan, Tom is 67, Susan is 66. Tom is retiring in October of 2026, so it's pretty soon. They have 2 adult children, 2 grandchildren, and they've been married for 41 years. And mostly Tom is a MD. He's retiring, like I said, and Susan does not have a big Social Security earnings account because she hasn't worked other than when they first got out of college. So, we got into the Social Security video, we talked about them, and we've been through all the different videos beforehand that you may want to go back and watch or haven't been following the series. But today we're looking at what type of estate planning have we done for them as part of this whole comprehensive plan. And where we start, and we start in the same place with everybody when we get to estate planning, is we want to find out, like, do you have any specific bequests in mind? Or have you already done some estate planning that is going to go to somebody other than the spouse? So, and people are all over the board on this. Is that very few people come to us and they say, oh yeah, I'm going to leave this to my son, or I'm going to leave this to my daughter, or, but some do. And so we want to know about those things first. And then we want to have a discussion. Do you have a desire to do that? And we kind of want to know in the ultimate state, because that's going to, and then we're going to ask them, okay, so is this money or thing or item going to pass to your adult children? Is that going to happen at the first death of the 2 of you, if we're talking to a couple, as in Tom and Susan's case, or is that going to happen after the second death? And that's usually stumps people, because they say, I always wanted my son to have this, or I always wanted my daughter to have this. Okay, or my grandchildren, but is your surviving spouse, which we don't know which one of the 2 of you that's going to be, and this was the case with Tom and Susan, is they really started looking at this and they said, no, we're not going to pass much to our children until both of us are gone. And that makes our work easier than people that say, no, we want to pass this to our kids and we want to give it to them when the first one of us dies. Well, then that's going to take away from the surviving spouse. And then, Tom, you may want to come in at this point and just talk a little bit about which you brought up about second marriages, which is actually not Tom and Susan.
Yeah, so this isn't specific to Tom and Susan, but where we run into a lot of this, where it becomes an issue, is when we have a couple that's in their second marriage, they have children from a previous marriage, and they've always thought along, it's like, I'll leave all my money to my kids that were not my spouse's kids, right? It's her stepkids. So I'll talk of it as the husband saying this. I want to leave the money to my kids, and my wife will be okay. When we start doing the planning, we might recognize like you can't afford to do that. Like, in your wife is not going to be okay without the money going to her. And so there's tension here, right? It's because they want the money to go to their kids from a previous marriage, but they can't afford to leave it all to them because they need to take care of their spouse. Life insurance is a great solution to help solve some of that, right? Whether we leave the life insurance to the spouse or the life insurance to the kid, at least we have money going to whichever party we want to, so we can solve some of those goals. But second marriages become complicated very quickly, especially if they're more recent second marriages, right? If you got married, 20 years ago and your kids have a good relationship with your new spouse, that's not typically as difficult. But, marriages later in life where the kids really don't have the relationship with the new spouse, it gets hairy pretty quickly. And we need to sort of figure out how we can manage all that. And you might not be able to afford to leave it to the kids without leaving it to the spouse. And that, again, gets to the idea in this whole video is the first step in this estate planning that we're doing for a lot of our clients is making sure the surviving spouse is okay. And then once that's taken care of, we get to sort of the next generation.
Yeah, and by the way, most people are okay with that. I mean, they come in here, especially Tom and Susan. I mean, it was just all about, they were asking, can I retire? Do we have enough money to retire? Can we maintain our lifestyle? And the answer was a resounding yes. And if you've been following this series, you can see that we've helped them do it, managing taxes and Social Security checks and planning for long-term care, just doing all those things. But yes, you can retire. But then the subsequent planning, which is estate planning, is when the first one of you dies and the other one lives on, especially if that is in your 70s, and then the other one lives till the 80s or 90s, now you've got a surviving spouse that we're planning for 10 or 20 years. And most of the time, especially people that have been married for 41 years, that's the first thing that's on their mind is, how is my wife going to be left if I go? Or vice versa. The wife is, how is my husband going to be left if I die soon or 10 years from now and he lives for 20 more years? And so that's where we get this typically, and it was in Tom and Susan's case, the biggest concern. And let's talk about some of those issues. So as soon as a person passes away, whether it's the husband or the wife, and in Tom and Susan's case, Tom's Social Security check is like $4,300 a month now. Susan's is like $2,000 a month now. And so as soon as the first death happens, the $2,000 that Susan was getting stops. And the survivor of the two of them are going to get the $4,200. So there's a $2,000 loss of income. IRMAA threshold is now $109,000, where it was $218,000. Now it'll be more in the future with inflation, but let's just deal with today numbers. That's a big thing where people, in Tom and Susan's plan, they're setting their Roth conversion threshold right under that $218,000. So they don't pay IRMAA, but they still do Roth conversions. And then all of a sudden, one of them passes away. The survivor goes on with a $109,000 threshold. We're going to have to rethink a lot of things. RMDs, they're at the single tax brackets. So again, like in their plan, they are taking the RMDs at 73, and they're going to take them for the rest of their life. And it's not a problem for them because they need to live off of their money. But we also are doing some Roth conversions to lessen RMDs, and we're doing all that around that $218,000 IRMAA threshold. And married couple tax brackets, they're going to go to the single tax bracket. Then their POA on the documents that they've completed, there are each other's power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. So when the first one dies, the surviving spouse no longer can use their spouse that's now deceased as the POA. So these POAs need to be written that the next child steps in and functions as the POA. And then home health is much more difficult. There's a lot of older people who one of them's sick and one of them's healthy, and the healthy one takes care of the one who's not well. And they, when you're dealing with the surviving spouse, you lose your caregiver, and it's, become a solo agent. So these are the issues at the surface that we just want to deal with. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think, related to these issues, first step is just making sure they have enough income, right? I mean, their income is going to be cut, if not only by Social Security, one of the checks is going away, right? Which is going to be impactful depending on the size of the various checks, right? And everyone's situation is different. In the planning for Tom and Susan, like they have annuities to help create some additional income so that they can afford to have that reduction in one of the checks. But some people, that's a really impactful moment, right? They've lost the check. They're now at the higher tax brackets. They could wake up one day and have less take home pay than they did. I mean, that's very natural, right? So they have less income and higher taxes and potentially higher IRMAA. It's really difficult, right? So we need to make sure things are set up that way. And then, again, related to that is we're looking at tax brackets, we're looking at the IRMAA brackets. The one thing that a lot of people miss, right, and when we start bringing up Roth conversions, and we have a previous video where we talked about that, and we'll get to the tax planning on the next video too, is some people come back and say, I don't want to pay taxes now. I don't want to go into these higher tax brackets. I don't want to do this, which is okay for the short term, but it's very short term thinking, right? When we start looking at long term, what impact happens when the first spouse passes? And I see it every day where we have a spouse who's died. The surviving spouse is coming in. They're in a crisis mode because their spouse just passed away, understandably. And now they're trying to figure out what to do for income. And then we start showing them what the tax implications are. And it blows them away, right? They just are not prepared for that. And IRMAA is this one of these sneaky ones that hits you 2 years later. And it's really frustrating. So again, we need to think through a lot of that, set things up now in preparation for that. And again, that's where a lot of the estate planning starts with when we're doing these plans here.
Yeah. So this is the big deal in a lot of the plans we're doing is we want to make sure that person who survives the couple or the survivor, especially if it's going to go on for a number of years, is okay. Yeah. We talked about the change in Social Security, the change in IRMAA, long-term care. We haven't talked about that too much, but now they're solo and, they're going to need to have the policy set up for that. RMDs are affected. The tax brackets that you're paying taxes on those RMDs, their income, they've had a loss of income. And then this is the topic today is estate planning. So all of these affected, and then taxes generally go up on a single, the widow's tax. So now we want to talk about what they do with the attorney. And we led them to an attorney. They happen to live in North Carolina, which is where we're located. So we have an attorney that is right in our office, and that's only good for people in North Carolina that we can utilize. But we also have a law firm that works in about 24 states. And if you're in one of those 24 states, we can line you up where they're in sync with us and the financial plan. And if you want to use your own attorney, your own estate planning attorney, we coordinate with them to give them our piece of the financial advice and really our recommendations in the estate plan. So this is what Tom and Susan, they didn't have all this stuff laid out. They hadn't messed with it since their kids were little. And so the basic 4 documents, the durable power of attorney, and by the way, power of attorney ends when you die. So in other words, if Tom made Susan his power of attorney, and when Tom is deceased, she's no longer the power of attorney for him. She's the surviving spouse, but a durable for all financial things. You want your spouse to have that in case you get dementia, and now she can sign things for you, whereas that's not really the right thing to do for RMDs and that kind of thing. So you need a durable power of attorney, and you need one of your children, one of your adult children, as the number 2. The durable healthcare power of attorney, and that is just simply, it's different than the financial power of attorney. It's just for healthcare decisions, making a deal with the doctor, setting up a home healthcare agency, just all things medical. An advanced directive or living will, and a last will and testament. And the last will and testament, everybody knows what that is. A lot of people don't have it. They had it, but some updating was necessary. We just started all over. And in their case, we are recommending a revocable living trust for a couple of reasons, but mainly because one of their adult sons, they're concerned about his handling of money, okay? The responsibility around money, and especially if death of both of them occurred um, early, and in other words, in the next few years, they're just concerned that he would come into all this money and he wouldn't use it appropriately. So that's one of the reasons for the revocable living trust. It also works very well with real estate because there's no beneficiary, at least in North Carolina. Some states have a beneficiary deed. So by putting their house in a revocable living trust and a few of their other assets, they can avoid probate and have things pass appropriately at their death. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, so these are sort of the list of documents that we recommend most people have. The trust sometimes, sometimes not, depending on the situation. But certainly the power of attorneys are important. The will is important. The advance directive, again, really giving your wishes. And really that's helpful for your family. And I went through this with my family. It's like when someone is in the hospital, they're very sick, and you're having to make tough decisions, families start fighting, right? There's disagreements on what mom or dad wants. There's not clarity there. Really, that advance directive takes some of that burden off of your kids who are having to make these tough decisions if you laid out kind of what your wishes are. So I think that's an important piece of that. One thing that I want to point out is when you have, and this is something that a lot of people miss, is when you have beneficiaries listed on the account. So think of your IRAs, your 401ks, any insurance policies you have, all of them will have named beneficiaries. That happens prior to the will. That supersedes the will. That it doesn't matter what the will says. If the beneficiary says one thing, that's what's going to happen. And so sometimes I've seen sort of really bad situations where we're reviewing accounts, we're doing a plan for a couple, and they've listed an ex-spouse and they've just left them as the beneficiary on the account. And I point that out. They say, "Oh, it's okay. I have a will. The will says something else." And I have to let them know it doesn't matter what the will says. The beneficiary is going to happen first. And so I want you, if you're watching this video, if nothing else, I want you to check your beneficiary designations on all your accounts to make sure they're in line with what your wishes are. Because once you've died, you can't change it, right? I mean, that's something that's in place at death. It freezes, and it's going to happen, whatever says on there. And then another piece of, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, things that don't always have beneficiary designations, you can go to them and add what's called a POD, or some places call it TOD, payable on death or transfer on death. And it acts just like a beneficiary, right? So it passes outside of the will. It goes directly to them. And anything that passes through beneficiary designation is going to happen quickly. It's not going to go through the probate process. It's going to be pretty smooth. And so one of the general goals that we have in a lot of the estate planning we're doing is having things pass to who we want them to go to in the smoothest way possible. We're really trying to limit the headaches that your kids, if that's who the beneficiaries are going to have when they're dealing with sort of these accounts here. And so the will is important. I don't think you should ignore the will. To me, though, it's sort of this catch-all document that makes sure that if anything got missed, if there was no beneficiary designation, if there was no payable on death, at least we have the will that is in line with what our wishes are to make sure it all gets to the right spot. But anything we can have pass outside the will is certainly going to be a smoother process. It's going to happen more quickly. It's not going to be tied up in the courts. And sometimes families just need liquidity, right? When someone dies, unfortunately, it just takes money to bury a loved one, to arrange all of those things. And so having access to cash quickly is going to be important.
Now, the last piece that I want to go over here is federal estate taxes. So Tom and Susan have a net worth of over 4 million, short of 5 million, which is a lot of money, but it's not near the threshold of the federal estate tax. Is 15 million is the threshold. So most people that we deal with are not under the federal estate tax. And a lot of them don't really know whether they're in that or not. And the benefit of this planning is they learn they don't have to worry about it. Now, some states do have an inheritance tax with a much lower threshold, some of them as low as $1 million. Now, for these couples' case, because they live in North Carolina, there is no inheritance or estate tax for the state taxes in North Carolina. But I just wanted to bring that point up, is the big problem for people like Tom and Susan is the pent up taxes in the 401k and IRA. Is is that if both of them were to die in the next few years, there's a substantial money in the IRA. The adult children are going to inherit it, and they're going to have a problem. We have a lot of other videos on that. So we want to make sure that you understand that federal estate taxes are really not a thing for people that are under 15 million. And then secondly, where there is a problem with taxes, it's usually in the IRA. And one final note, do not leave your IRA to the trust. You want to leave your IRA typically to the beneficiaries directly, because it's going to avoid a big tax bomb after you pass away. So I want to bring Tom back on. I'm Hans Scheil.
And I'm Tom Griffith.
And we thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.